Listeners, are you ready for a monthly literary adventure? Let me introduce you to the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book across a wide variety of genres. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live Bookish Flights interview. Can't make the live? Don't worry, we'll send you the recording. Our September book club selection is Darkness Calls the Tiger by Janier Trump, which is a World War II historical fiction novel set in Burma. Head over to the link in our show notes to learn more and see our upcoming 2024 BFF Book Club selections. Hi, I'm Kara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, I am chatting with Hannah Mae. Since day one, Hannah Mae and her two sisters were instilled with a love for God and His scriptures by their loving parents. She grew up in the Ohio-Miami Valley, graduated from homeschool in 2012 at the age of 17, and finished 2 online pre-college semesters and earned a scholarship with Ohio Christian University. Hannah co-owns and teaches dance with her sisters in her family's studio, a time to dance performing arts education. She enjoys making jewelry, playing guitar, and furthering her ocarina skills. She's also a church custodian, a Christian apologist, and a proud supporter of Answers in Genesis. Being an avid gamer, Hannah's game design Celestial became her very first book thanks to her friends and family's encouragement. She can't imagine not writing. Welcome to the show, Hannah.
Well, thanks so much for having me. Hello and good morning. Assuming
Good.
this releases in the morning.
It will release in the morning, so we're
Ah,
recording in the morning. It will release in the morning. It's all going to flow perfectly.
oh, fabulous, fabulous. Good morning, America.
Yeah. So, well, this is a fantastic bio about you. I have a question though. What is the ocarina?
Well, it is actually a woodwind instrument. It has
Okay.
been around since probably the earliest days. And and honestly, the ocarina got its name to fame from the video game Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. So
Okay.
basically, an ocarina you can imagine is like a large chamber with a lot of holes, and mine's a triple chamber, so I got like 3 octaves on it. And more or less, where it gets the name ocarina actually is when it was the Italians who formed it into a specific shape. They call it the sweet potato shape,
Okay.
and the name ocarina is Italian for little goose because it looks like a tiny goose. So that's where
Oh,
you get the name. So it's a very old sort of type of wind instrument.
okay. I am
Mhm.
fascinated. I'm going to be going to Google this when we get off our call here this morning. So,
Awesome.
yeah, and listen to the sound of it too. My family and I play the piano, so instruments. I'm like, oh, I want to know what this
Wonderful.
is.
I
Yeah.
highly recommend the YouTube channel David Eric Ramos.
Okay.
He's the guy I used to help find my to choose the type of ocarina I wanted to do, and he's a professional. So
Okay.
if you want to hear some amazing ocarina play, look up David Eric Ramos on YouTube. You'll find a lot of really awesome videos.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I will be doing that. So I'm also very intrigued about how your game design became your first book. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that was a funny story, wasn't it? Well, to tell you the truth, you know how the Lord just kind of like changes the plans on you without you realizing He's going to do that. He
Yes.
does it all the time, of course. But I wasn't planning to be an author at all. I mean, I was really wanting to be a video game designer because I've loved video games since I was 7 years old. And I knew a lot of great video games, but I was often bummed that there wasn't really a very good video game that kind of played into like Christian values.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it, put it that way, because when I say Christian game, you already hear that word and you're like, oh boy, yay. It's like,
Yeah.
because let's be honest here, I appreciate the heart behind those making the games. I appreciate what they're trying to do, but they stink. Right? Frankly, they stink. They're
Yeah.
they're not fun. So I wanted to make Christian video games that actually didn't stink for once and actually was something fun to play, and everything. So basically, I bought books, and actually, mom and dad gave me books of thick curriculum on video game design that I studied on my own. And I was creating video game designs. And one of my best ones was one that was basically an RPG design that was set around spiritual warfare. But when I was going to do this story and build this world to portray angels and demons, I wanted to be as biblically sound and respectful as possible, to present them in such a way that was plausible to what the Lord has given us. Because after all, who knows best what angels are like? God does.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to base it on human opinion. I didn't want to base it on anything like that. I just wanted to go straight from the scriptures. So I spent 3 months straight studying the Bible back and forth, everything it had to say about angels and demons. And I'll tell you right
Wow.
now, my brain blew up because there was a lot of things that I didn't realize, that I didn't think about regarding them. But anyway, by the
Yeah.
end of that process, I had written a story and I put it in a summary, and I was like, okay, do you want to read this real quick? And I showed it to my friends and family, and they were the ones who read it, loved it, and told me, you got to make that into a book. And I was like, what? It's like, are you kidding? I don't know how to do a book. It's like, so, and they pestered me for months. It's like they
Yeah.
wouldn't leave me alone about it. And well, as I kept thinking about it, I didn't to make the video game. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the resources. I didn't have the money. So I was like, okay, all right, fine. I'll do one chapter. One. I ended up doing two, but but
Yeah.
yeah. And to kind of shorten things a little bit, there was a lady in my church. Her name is Lenore Rose Burkhart. She's actually an independent author. She's done
Okay.
a lot of really good books. She's actually quite successful.
Okay.
She heard about it, and she was the one who asked, "Can I see it?" And I was like, "All right." I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay."
I'm putting
And she's
myself
a
out there.
yeah, and she's the kind of person who doesn't pull her punches. She's nice, but she doesn't pull her punches. It was her though who shocked me when she said, "You've actually got something really worth pursuing here. I'm impressed." It was like, what? And so she sent me to the ACFW, American Christian Fiction Writers. And for the following 8 years, I was learning how to write a book well while writing my first book. And then after 10 years, Celestial came out, and now it's making big impacts. And now I've discovered that, the Lord had a different plan for me, and I love being an author. It's fun. So I really like it.
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes the Lord puts something on our heart and sometimes we're resistant to it, right? Like, nope, that's not what I wanted to do. I want to, in your case, right?
Yeah.
Like, I wanted to be a video game designer. Nope, I'm not even
Mm-hmm.
going to listen to what that is being put on my heart. Did you put up some resistance at first to this?
I wouldn't call it resentful resistance. I'd call it more hesitant resistance
Okay,
because I was studying to do games. I was not studying to do books.
sure.
And I'm not saying that I didn't have some touch points into fiction writing before. I mean, looking back, I remember in my 12th grade, in my homeschool co-op, there were a couple of writing competitions that we had for the different grade levels, and I actually won in my grade group
Okay.
for historical fiction. So I guess the tools were there and the things were there. It's just that when it came to actually turning what I was visually envisioning and designing to be a great video game RPG, um, uh, I was just not confident that I could do that in a book form. And mom considers it the great irony because when I was younger, I didn't really care for writing projects. I really didn't. So it was more resistance because I don't feel qualified to do this. I don't know how to do this. Therefore, I shouldn't do it. So,
Sure. That
yeah.
makes sense. So, can you tell the listeners a bit about Celestial, what they could find if they're going to pick it up?
Oh, certainly, certainly. Well, this is something that I tell everyone who asks me what the story is about, and I call it my elevator pitch. It's like
Love
boiling it
it.
down to one sentence. My one sentence elevator pitch of what Celestial is about. It is a high action adventure about an angelic warrior who longs to understand salvation, even though he can't have it for himself. So, because it turns the whole thing on its head. I centered it around, you see, when I write, I center it around a biblical themes and biblical grounding. And when I was trying to decide what the crux of the story should be, I came across the Lord, I should say, brought me to First Peter chapter 1, 10 through 12, that spoke of our salvation as something angels long to look into. And it is important to kind of remind ourselves, hey, you know what? This relationship that we have with Jesus Christ, that is totally unique to the human being. Angels, they are in God's presence. There's biblical proof that they have emotions, they have a sense of choice, very similar to what we have in many ways, a sense of sentience. But at the same time, they are not given that ability. There's no redemption plan for demons. There's nothing that Jesus did on the cross that's going to redeem an angel who decided not to follow God anymore. This is something that's unique to us. So when people read this book, there are a couple things that I believe they're going to find. First of all, they're going to get a completely new perspective on viewing our salvation because, in most Christian stories, whether that is in a movie or a book, usually you have the cynic or the person who's unsure and they're like, I don't know God. And then they eventually come to know God and they realize that they need God. Now you have a protagonist who would want that relationship more than anything, but because of what he is, he's barred from it. So more or less, you're kind of looking at it from his perspective.
Okay.
That's one thing that they're going to see. And I think another thing that this is something that I can bring up because there's so many people who have told me this, especially people who really, really love the book, is that they have never read a book like this before, and they mean that in a positive way. I mean, it's the sense that, when I was trying to write this book and trying to, like market it a little bit, I didn't even know what to categorize it as, and nobody else
Yeah.
does either. But more importantly, people when they read this, they find themselves, and this is what I've prayed for all this time. They found themselves challenged in how they viewed the spiritual side of things. And in many cases, a lot of people will comment that I've never seen angels presented this way before at all, but yet it makes sense biblically. And but more importantly, and this was my prayer the whole time I was working on this, Lord, if a non-Christian reads it, I want them to be fully entertained and get this new perspective of the faith that they've never had before. And for those who are in the faith, I want you to be challenged to consider the preciousness of the relationship that you have with Christ and not taking that for granted.
Well, that sounds amazing. I am so intrigued to pick this up because like I said, will probably learn a ton about angels that I've never even thought of or considered. And I love doing that through story. And
Well, fabulous. I'd
yeah,
be so eager to hear your thoughts after you do it. I mean, even if you message me privately, I like to hear from readers both the criticisms and the positives because I like to continually learn.
yeah,
Just because I wrote a book and just because it did very, very well does not mean I don't have much to learn yet. And I like to
sure.
continue to improve. So I'd be
Yes.
so interested to hear your thoughts and your takeaways once you're
Okay.
done.
Well, yeah, I will definitely be doing that. So, have you still been writing?
Yes, actually. And I wasn't sure if I was going to at first because, I was spending 10 years on one book that,
Sure.
I just honestly just came out of the blue. And I just thought to myself, okay, does this mean this will be the only book I'll do? And for a while, I kind of thought it would be. Though it's kind of funny because once it ended, once I finished the writing process, the book was done, it was published. I felt a little blue. It's like I worked on that for so long, and now it's over. but,
Yeah, I'm missing
but
something now.
yeah, it's like a sudden hole. And it's like then I wanted to be open to what the Lord had in mind for me. I mean, clearly He had in mind for me a book rather than a video game, so I have to be open to when He wants to change something. So
Yeah.
my prayer for a while was, okay, Lord, I love growing with you through this process because that was the best part of it. I grew with Him spiritually through this process, and I just basically asked Him, Lord, I don't know if you want me to keep writing books or not, but if you do, let the ideas continue to come. And if
Yeah.
you don't, show me what the next season of my life is. Show me what the next part of my life is going to be that you want to take me to. And boy, howdy, he gave me idea after idea to a point where I have enough content for 3 whole books for this
Wow.
as a series. So I
Oh,
am actually
yay.
I'm working on the prequel right now. I just finished chapter 14 2 days ago, actually,
Okay.
the first draft. And I can tell you, you'd think that after going through the huge 3 month process of trying to take in and contextualize angels in a biblically compatible way, you think that you're gonna the sequel's gonna be good now. You don't have to deal with those rules anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like I shoot myself in the foot because this next book is arguably trickier to put into paper and into a book form than the first one was. But I welcome the challenge. I mean, I'm just talking about
Yeah.
like a huge bunch of new theological big questions that this whole story has in mind. But,
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to see and hear about your progress. So also keep me posted from that perspective.
certainly.
What do you know now that you wish you knew when you started?
I guess one thing I suppose I really would could have used as good advice is, basically trust in God's timetable,
Mm,
because I'm a very much a go-getter. I'm very ambitious, and I would say that I'm quite the person in, like, when I'm on video as a video gamer, I would be what you would call a completionist. I'm the kind of
okay.
person who wants to get all the achievements, find all the quests, beat all the enemies at the best capacity. I'm always like that type of person. I deal with life that way. So when I'm writing a book, I'm like thinking, okay, well, maybe we're going to spend 1 year on a first draft. I ended up spending 4. you know, because I tell you what, my life is so busy. When I started writing that, I was like 17 years old, 18, just graduated. And at around that time, we actually started establishing our dance studio.
Okay.
And on top of that, I was a video game reviewer. I worked as a video game reviewer for a website. I was also a custodian at a church. I was also taking care of my
Wow.
grandmothers. I was also beading. It's like the writing part, that was my personal projects that constantly ended up at the bottom of the importance totem pole.
Yeah.
So the only times I could write at all was like maybe 15 minutes if I had them to spare twice in a week. So I
Wow.
could barely get any time to work on it. And there were days when I would be crying to myself and I'd be like, I don't think this book is ever going to get done. I'm wasting my time. But, there was something that I learned from a teacher that like. I absolutely love this guy. He's one of my favorite writing teachers I ever had. Alan Arnold. You're probably familiar with him.
Yeah.
But he taught an amazing writing class, where he emphasized that creating with the creator is about cherishing and enjoying the time that he decides you have to work together on a project.
And that's great advice, I think, just in general for life is it's God's timing. And
Mm-hmm.
no matter how much I'm similar to you in personality, you could be a go-getter, but it's in his timing. And
Yeah.
so,
And I'm very controlling. I tend to be very controlling. I've been working on it. I've been working on
yep,
it quite a bit.
yep. It's
And
a
I
work
think
in
maybe the
progress for many.
yeah. And I do think the writing process also helped me learn to not be so controlling. It's like
Yeah.
you can't do that.
Yeah. What a great and beautiful lesson for you. So let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. What type of genres do you enjoy?
Let's see. Mostly anything with good action adventure in it. That's
Okay.
that's usually the general consensus, because I've enjoyed sci-fis. I think I just read my first steampunk sci-fi very
Fun.
recently. Are you familiar with the Skyworld series by Morgan L. Busse?
No, I
She
haven't heard of
did
it.
she did Secrets in the Mist. It was actually really good. I'm gonna review it on my podcast actually.
Okay.
Um, and I also really enjoy fantasy. My favorite fiction of all time, now and forever, will be The Lord of the Rings. That is always my
Yes.
favorite. It's just masterful. And every time when I was writing my book, I kept trying to hit the quality and in-depthness level of Tolkien. Now, I can't write languages, but I can get that in other ways.
I was just gonna ask, it sounds like you've always been a reader then as well.
Yeah, I've been a very good reader. I will say though that growing up though, my main reading ship was not fiction books, although I did read a lot of fiction books. But most of my reading has been on educational books. I would be the
Sure.
kind of kid who I love school. I love my homeschooling, especially history. So it was not uncommon for me to sneak history books into my bed, pull out a nightlight when everyone goes to sleep, and just read and read and read and read and read about different ancient cultures and stuff like that. I just love absorbing, learning what's happened in the past. How did they live? And I think in a way that really helped me, because the number one book I read all the time is the Bible.
Yeah.
And that kind of academic mindset, I think, is a prerequisite skill, you could say,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in your busyness, how do you find time to read today?
in bed.
Yeah, love it.
if
So you kind of
if
close out your day with that?
Yeah, if you saw my schedule, you'd wonder how I breathe. But yeah, usually when it comes to reading, usually it's not until like the very end of the day. I'll go to bed and I'll read for a couple chapters and then I
Okay.
will stop, because when I get invested in a story, I don't fall asleep very easily.
Yeah.
I can just there were times
Keep
when I've
going.
attempted to just read and read and read and read and read and read. It's like, okay, Hannah, it is like 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. You got to get up at 6. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, put it away.
Wonderful. I love when books can draw you in like that though too. It's a
Hmm.
good thing. Well, you have been so gracious to bring a book flight of books with you today as well. Can you tell
Yes.
us a little bit about how they pair together?
Oh, certainly, certainly. Well, all these were kind of like personal to me because they were effective in how Celestial came about. So I kind of thought that it would probably be a good pairing, because I was like thinking, okay, if kind of like treating it like a meal. Okay, here's your main meal. What are your side dishes?
I love that. What is the first book of the pairing that you brought today?
It is called Searching the Scriptures by
Okay.
Charles Swindoll.
Okay.
And the reason why I bring this up is because when I was going through the process of writing Celestial, I already told you I was using the Bible to determine my creative choices, my what, my how, and my why.
Yeah.
And that's what led me to start my blog, Flying Faith, along with its podcast, Flying Faith Talks, because something that I find kind of sad in a lot of writing circles, even among Christian writing circles, is how often I see other writers stressing out over questions like, how do I handle this violence? How do I handle whether or not to have cuss words or anything like that? And they kind of like run around like chickens with their heads cut off. But and I'm thinking, go back to the scriptures, go back to the word, and what I try to do on my blog is I try to encourage other creatives, regardless of what your creative field is, how to use the Bible to not only unleash the best kind of creativity for your project, but also how to use it to further your walk with God through the process, like what I went through, because
Yeah.
I feel like this is something that
That's a
everybody should get
great.
into.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the reason why I bring up Charles Swindoll's Searching the Scriptures is because this is a really amazing book written by a very, very knowledgeable pastor and a pastor that I can trust, about how to get deeper into the Bible, how to get into the Word, and to understand it correctly. I highly recommend this book. It is very easy to understand, it's very easy to follow. And once you understand the four main points about studying the scriptures and you get that memorized, and it's hard to let go. It's real.
Yeah.
It's a great way to get in. So
Okay. Well, that's a
yeah.
fantastic suggestion. Thank you.
You're
And then
welcome.
what is the next book that you brought today?
Frank Peretti's This Present Darkness.
Okay.
This one I would consider like a sort of companion book towards Celestial. Because when I started working on Celestial, I was still like 18, 19 at the time. Mom and dad suggested that I read this book because it kind of deals in the same sort of thing, angels,
Okay.
supernatural, and stuff. And while I don't 100% agree with everything that Frank Peretti did in portraying the spiritual side of things, they were minor nitpicks anyway. So don't worry, I'm not saying he did anything horribly
Yeah.
wrong. But uh, it was still a really good story, and I kind of found myself in a bizarre position where it fascinated me how similar yet dissimilar we were in how we presented angels and demons. But when if you want to have like a story where you have a lot of really good action and and a really interesting view into how angels and demons might interact with our world, this Present Darkness is a good pick, and it's good
Okay.
suspense, good storytelling. Again, aside from my little minor nitpicks as far as what he decided to do in portraying them, again, tiny nitpicks, it still was a really good book. And so if anyone wants to kind of know what book kind of helped spawn some of the genesis to Celestial, This Present Darkness would be one.
I love that because that's how the book flight really came about was more that it started with like genre based. Like I wanted to explore the fantasy genre. And so I just
Mm-hmm.
interviewed a friend about that loves fantasy, like what three books, if I wanted to explore this genre, should I try? And so
Yeah.
this could be a great little pairing in itself is you could read Hannah's Celestial book and then you could go read This Present Darkness and you could compare the two and books that had that kind of, matched together and you could compare them along the lines or
Yeah.
learn more. And
Yeah.
so that was really how the book flight came about,
Yeah.
quote unquote, when the show was in its beginning phases. So
Yeah. And plus it is something to be said as I went through the years and through the critique groups, I was the most commonly compared to Frank Peretti when people were reading my stuff.
okay, wonderful. And then what's the last book you brought today?
Okay, this one is Shadowcast by Crystal Grant. And I will say that this one's kind of like one of the most personal ones,
Okay.
because as I went through the process of writing, one person that I really befriended and became good friends with, her name is Crystal Grant. There you go, the
Okay.
author of this book. And you kind of know how Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, they basically were partners when they were writing The Lord of the Rings and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Um, me personally, I like to consider that them being sister books that way because they grew up together.
Yeah.
Celestial and Shadowcast grew up together
Okay.
because yeah, because as I was going through the processes, it was kind of funny. When it came to reading Crystal Grant's Shadowcast, let me tell you, it's a fantasy story, and I'm usually not into romantic fantasy stories, but the way Crystal Grant did it was really good. She even got me into it. It was really
Okay.
good. And her storytelling was excellent. And the way she processed the relationship was very real and didn't feel pretentious. I can honestly say I don't think Celestial would have ended up the way it is without Crystal. And so this is my way of not only supporting her because I have a on my website I have a list of supported creatives, Christian creatives that I
Okay.
personally invest in. She's one of them. Uh, I not only want to help support these creatives because when it comes to smaller writers, people who don't have the big names behind themselves, it's really
Sure.
hard to get your name out there.
Yeah.
So this is my way of trying to help her continue to let people know, hey, she's an amazing author. She trusts in the Lord. She maintains the biblical creativity. You should read her stuff.
That's so fun. I've always wanted to be a part of like the Tolkien and C.S. Lewis group. I'm like, how do I find something like that where you just elevate
Yeah.
each other along the way?
Yeah, I
Um,
actually just formed a group like that just very, very recently. We call ourselves the Wing Seekers.
okay.
Yeah, because believe it or not, and I'll make this short because I know that we can't have the podcast going on forever. Although I wish it, I wish we could. When I went to Rome Makers, because my book Celestial was nominated in 2023 for Best Supernatural at the Rome
Okay.
Awards. I was there, and apparently the lady who reviewed me on one of the book websites that did my book, she gave me 5 stars, and she didn't know that we both lived within the same state. We were within an hour of each other, and she was looking for a
Wow.
writing partner. So the lady who ran the website that had that review, she said, "You've got to meet her." So I walked over to that table, and she was like saying to her, "This is the girl of that book you really liked." And it's like, "Oh, you're amazing." And then she said, "Now you tell her where you're from." And then I told her, and she's like, "No way." And so she was like, "We have to partner together." So, and
That's amazing. Can you also tell the listeners where they can find your blog and your podcast?
certainly. Okay, so my blog has a very easy name, flyingfaith.org. You just kind of run that together,
Okay.
flyingfaith.org. And usually you can find everything from there.
Okay.
And I know that by the time this podcast releases, it's going to be way later, but I actually just released a very special sneak peek visual preview of what's coming in my prequel,
Okay.
so people can
Cool.
get a little bit of a taste of what I'm going for. But you can also find the podcast there as well, along with the list of support creatives if you want to look at other people who have great works. And I don't mean just books. I've also got animators, I've got dancers, I've got musicians, if you
Cool.
want to see all kinds of things. And of course, if you guys listen to Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can find my podcast show, Flying Faith Talks.
Wonderful. Well, I'll have all the links for that in the show notes as well. How I love to end our episodes are just with a speed round of questions here, real quick.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
I'm
Are
all ready.
you a rereader?
Sometimes. Sometimes this depends on what time I have and how much I really love the book. If you're talking about the Bible, though, I repeat it every single day.
Okay. Wonderful. And that might lead to my next question. What is one book you've read that has changed your life?
Let's see. I know this is a little out of left field, but I'd say this book called Fight Like a Girl.
Okay.
It's again, this is not a fiction book, but let's just to put it simply, being a tomboy, I devalued what it meant to be a girl because I felt like being a girl was kind of lame. I kind of felt like it's like why do guys have to get all the fun stuff? I don't want to be the princess in the tower. I want to be the one carrying the sword and slaying the dragon. So it's like who wants that? But this book actually helped me take a new perspective at what true biblical femininity is like. So now I really appreciate the power of the woman of Proverbs 31. And I just think it's a must read, especially for anyone who is, for anyone like me who feels like I don't like this girly stuff, so I must be a boy. It's like, no, you're still designed to be a strong woman. You just need to change what femininity means and
Yeah.
look at it from a biblical perspective. So I would say Fight Like a Girl was probably one of the earliest books that really affected me.
Okay.
And now I don't feel feel like I'm less of a girl just because I don't like to wear pretty pink frilly dresses. So
Yeah. You can
yeah.
go slay the dragon.
Yes, I can. I can. It's just different. I'm not a guy, and that's perfect. It's like
Yeah.
I fight the dragon in a different way.
Yep.
It's like,
Okay. And then where is your favorite place to read?
mm, let's see. I mean, of course, the most frequent place is bed, but I suppose if I were to choose any place, I would probably. I'd like to imagine being in a cafe full of cute cats. There's a cup of coffee with me, and there's a beautiful sunset outside. You
Oh,
know,
that sounds amazing.
yeah, that reminds me of my times reading The Lord of the Rings to my grandfather. We would walk for up and down his driveway for a bit while the sun set, and then we'd sit in the back porch swing, and I would read The Lord of the Rings to him because his Parkinson's got so bad. So
Yeah.
that's and one of the reasons why Lord of the Rings means so much to me.
Yeah.
It was a, it was a very special him and me time, and that was like shortly before he passed away. So,
Yeah. That's a beautiful
um,
memory there.
yeah, so I always like to go to if I could, I'd go back to that back porch swing, see the sunset, read Lord of the Rings. Yes.
Okay. All right. Beautiful memory. And then lastly, what are you reading next?
I'm trying to remember the name of it. I've received a lot of books from other authors who would like me to review their books because you see, when I review books, I don't just simply pick apart the book. I try to look at the heart of the reader behind the book, and I try to encourage their best qualities. So even if the book itself is meh, I can look at the author and say, "You're really good at doing this.
Yeah.
Progress in that. Use the scriptures to further that gift." That's what I like to do on my
Sure.
podcast. It's one of the things. So I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it was called Royal and Ancient by Amanda Lauer.
I love the title of it.
Of course, I certainly plan on reading a few things. Like one of the books that I'm really excited to get to eventually, I want to read The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. I didn't get around to reading that one yet. I really want to. And
Okay.
I also want to read Fire and Ash.
Oh,
Is Yeah, I've heard about that one. I actually got that book signed at the last conference I was in, and I'm really excited to see it. But
wonderful.
I also want to help support other independent authors. I want to
Absolutely.
help them reach a wider audience because I was in that place,
Yeah.
and in a certain ways, I'm still in that place, where when you're an independent author like myself, one of the big drawbacks is trying to get found, it's
Yeah.
like, so I try to help support those guys too. So,
That's
but
wonderful.
yeah, I believe she's going to be next. Eventually, later on, I'll break from book reviews and then I'll just read what I really, really am excited for, like Fire and Ash. But
Okay.
I've enjoyed reading other people's books though, so it's not like I'm thinking, oh, I gotta read another one. No, no,
Yeah.
I'm gonna enjoy it. I know.
It still transports you on a journey through the book. So,
Yes,
but
yes,
well, we're both out here doing our part for the independent authors, I think. So,
yeah. We need that exposure as best we can.
yeah.
But I thank the Lord every day for the kind of exposure He's given me. And I like to consider things in the long run because, yeah, you can be popular for the day and be a flash in the pan, or you can go for to try to write something that is universal, something that
Yeah.
has long lasting value. And so you're more like a snowball. You start small, but you go down the mountain long enough, you're going to get big. So,
Yeah. I
I mean,
love that
of course, that's not the
analogy.
yeah, of course, that's not the reason why I'm doing it. It's not because I want to get rich, it's not because I want to get famous. I just want to serve the Lord and
Yeah.
reach others through the gifts He's given me. Because
Yeah.
that's really what matters. I mean, even if nobody read the book, just the kind of value I got from walking with Him intimately through the process, that made the journey more than worth it.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know your time is precious and I appreciate all you've given me.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. You're wonderful, and I know I've heard your reviews, not reviews, your interviews before, and I know that a lot of people really love being with you, and I can definitely see why. You do great work here.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode today with Hannah Mae and her book flight of books that influenced the writing of Celestial. We'd love to hear what other books you'd pair with this book flight at bookishflights.com. That is also where you can find a full list of our show notes and the books we chatted about in this episode. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time. Hey listeners, Bookish Flights has been nominated for the Women in Podcasting Awards in the Authors and Books category. If you could head over to www.womenpodcasters.com/vote and vote for Bookish Flights in the Author and Books category, I would greatly appreciate it. Your vote would go a long way in helping the podcast gain visibility and spread our love for books and reading. Head to the show notes to get a direct link to vote. Thank you.